Hello, everyone. Getting older. Now, some of us can't bear the thought, and we do everything we can to fight the aging process, while others embrace it and vow to do it gracefully, grey hairs, wrinkly bits and all. Whatever your expectations or fears are about aging, there are some facts and truths about getting old and older that we actually have to accept. Yes, we are living longer these days, but there are things that will happen as the years go by. You can set your clock by it. There are the physical signs, like our metabolism slowing down, for example, making it harder to fight the bulge, our bodies aching in places we never actually knew we had places. And there's the mental health stuff as well, like brain fog. Our fading memories, our social lives and selves go through changes too. And even spiritually, there seem to be some big shifts happening. On Syntropy today, we're looking at the harsh realities of getting on in years, and helping us face that reality is life and relationship coach Paula Quinsee, who shared a post on aging, which actually inspired this conversation. Paula, you don't know what you started here. Welcome to Syntropy.
Uveka. It's good to be back.
Yes. And, your post on aging, Paula, was quite stark. And I can admit that at the ripe old age of 47, I can already tick a few of the boxes there, right, from that post there. Now, there are things we all know are going to happen. Like, and this made me think of when I used to make fun of my mom, because she used to confuse all three of us. I have an older sister and a younger brother, and then she'd call me by my sister's name, and then another time she'd call me by my brother's name. Like, dude, that's a boy. How can you call me? Like, seriously, look at me. I'm your daughter. How could you think that this was him? And I'm doing it. I find that I'm doing the same thing. Sometimes I look at my child, who are you? Or I call the one by the other one's name. Or, those things are already setting in. And already I have aches and pains. I get up in the morning and my ankles are stiff and, all of those things. So those things don't start happening when you're only in your 50s or your 60s or your 70s. They're happening sometimes in your 30s and your 40s as well. Now, before we get, specific, there are other truths that you spoke of. And before we get specific about those, like I said, we know that human beings are living to ripe old ages, and pandemics aside, we seem to be doing things and taking things that help us look older, that help us, not age as quickly. And many people don't even look their age. I mean, I've seen many 80-year-olds who look 50 or they look 60 years old, and that's a good thing. But I want to know from you, as a relationship and life coach and somebody who's in touch with humanity, how are most people actually feeling about aging? Let's start there. Are they worried? Are they fearful about their mortality? Or are most folks just taking it as it comes? And are they accepting that they're getting older?
I think the majority of people, there's an ignorance there as to what aging really entails, particularly from a mental health and a lifestyle perspective.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us in our minds, we think we are 10, 15, 20 years younger than what we actually are. I'm 51 and in my head I'm still 18 and I can still do a lot of things.
Well, you look 18, Paula, from where I'm sitting, but yes.
But I think, we don't really sit down and really reflect and think about what is it going to look like when I retire, because it's too far away for us to really grasp it until we're actually in it and we're living it and we're experiencing it firsthand, that we start to realize some of the realities of getting on in life.
So would you reckon, and specifically now we'll get down to some of the specifics that were on that post that you shared, do you think that reality starts to first set in when the physical manifests itself? Like I said, it's getting harder to fight that bulge around the waistline for me. The aches and pains, the stiffness is there in the morning. I can't remember simple things. Is that where we should start accepting?
I think that's definitely a part of
it. Yeah.
A part of it, a big part is mindset, number one. And then number two is around lifestyle. It's a common fact that movement, physical activity, taking care of your mental health and well-being are big factors in how you're going to manage your life when you get to the ripe old age of retirement, whatever that is for you, because for all of us it's different. But yes, we need to accept that our body does change. Our ability to recover from illnesses, for example, changes. Our resilience levels change.
Yeah.
And with that is the accepting of it, but also there's again a choice. What are we going to do about it to manage it as well?
Yeah. And then there's the mental side of things that set in. Like we spoke about the brain fog, the memory, sometimes sort of, the confusion. Then we see things like dementia, we see things like Parkinson's, we see things like Alzheimer's that become more of a reality. Are we more prone to things like depression as we get older? Is that also another big one when it comes to aging and mental health?
It's definitely probably one of the biggest ones. So where we see it very easily, for example, is someone that has been in a corporate career and they've now stepped out of corporate to retire at the ripe old age of whatever the company stipulates, because often it's company stipulated.
And that's anywhere from 55 to 65, right? Sometimes,
exactly. Yeah. But they haven't necessarily put a plan in place to transition out of corporate life into retirement life. So immediately you've taken away a purpose and there's a loss of identity. Because in this corporate space, you had a title, whatever that job title was. You had an identity. You were a Mr. or a Mrs. or whatever the role and position was. Yes. You had people. You had social interaction with the people that you worked with. And you had a purpose, even if it was getting up every day and going somewhere and coming home. That gave you purpose in life and it gave you interaction and stimulation and cognitive abilities. When you step out of corporate, one day you're in corporate, it's your farewell party. The next day you're going, I'm going to enjoy retirement. I'm going to be sitting on the patio, sipping on my glass of wine and relaxing and not having all the stresses that I have now. That's great for 2-3 weeks or however long, and until the reality wears off and there's no stimulation, there's no purpose, there's no intellectual conversation, so to speak. You're not really using your brain from a stimulation point of view.
And people just don't know how to be.
And people don't know how to be because here you are potentially stuck at home with your partner. And if you haven't worked on your relationship and empty nesters, you're with a complete stranger, possibly.
And Paula, you got me thinking at that point and I'm remembering quite a few stories I heard when I was working in radio of people who retired and a couple of days later died from a heart attack or a stroke.
Yeah.
What happens in that case? I mean, do we have if we have any sort of insight into what exactly is the scientific explanation for that?
I think largely because we think that we function well on stress and we thrive on stress, but we don't realize the impact of stress. And then all of a minute, our body goes from being full on throttle with day-to-day stuff to now doing nothing.
Yeah.
And so in some instances your body can almost go into like a shock.
Yeah.
And you're not thriving on that adrenaline anymore and the cortisol and all of those other things that we were thriving on. So there's a large combination of that. But then not knowing what to do with ourselves, and our system can go into shutdown potentially. The other side of it is, just taking all of that away from you, it leaves you in a space of where depression can set in, and with that, suicidal thoughts, and sometimes even people committing suicide.
In their older years?
Yeah.
Is it because of that? And yes, and we've been hearing stories recently as well but we don't, and people say, oh yes, it must have been dementia, it must have been this, but sometimes it doesn't have to be that.
No,
it just
doesn't.
has to be that change of circumstance and that not knowing what to do with yourself after a certain age. And, I also find, as with my parents from time to time and talking to friends and their parents and in-laws, people get very emotional as they get older. They get quite emotional, more emotional than before. Why is that?
I think part of it is a frustration because you're measuring yourself against what you could do. I could do this and I could do that, and but now it takes me longer potentially. Also realizing that your social circle gets smaller and smaller because people move on, relationships move on. So either potentially you've widowed because your partner has passed on before you.
Yes.
So you're on your own and you're alone. Your families are living their own lives. They're busy. So your circle starts getting smaller and smaller. That purpose and identity is taken away, and the having to reinvent yourself, but not having the resources or the skills or the know-how and how to do that is where the emotions can start coming in. We start feeling lost. We start feeling alone and lonely. We start questioning our purpose in life and why are we here? What are we meant to be doing with our lives when these should be our golden years? We should be thriving and living life.
Yeah. And you got there before I did. I was going to talk about just our circles getting smaller you suddenly find your friends are dying. Or maybe, yes, they've moved away to it or gone to live with their kids in another city or gone to live somewhere else, and then losing a spouse as well. what does that do? What kind of fear and anxiety does that set in motion for many people? Does it come with fear? I would imagine that there's quite a bit of fear that actually sets in.
Definitely. First of all, the fear of being on your own, and how do you do some of the things that potentially your spouse did for you or your family used to support you with.
And on the other hand, also, you're so used to doing for someone else, and now you're not doing for that person.
Exactly. So again, your purpose is taken away. You know, I've seen it with my mom for so many years. Her purpose was taking care of Dad. Every day she would get up, make sure he had breakfast, took his medicine, had lunch, followed him around, you know, to make sure that he was okay, because he's unfortunately does have Alzheimer's and dementia. So, you know, taking care of him, and she became a full-time carer. And now that that's been taken away, can definitely see the deterioration from her side around not having that stimulation anymore.
And you would think that in that case, Paula, and no disrespect to the situation that your parents were in, that, you know, somebody on the other side, like your mum, might say, okay, now I can carry on with stuff for myself, or, you know, now I can live my life for me, because like you say, she dedicated herself to your dad. But that's not the case. And it's a bit mind-boggling. I don't know, maybe I'm speaking as a younger person, and you'd go, okay, this tragedy has happened, but let me now try and move on and do what's best for me.
Yeah. And the sad reality is, because of those circumstances, she's lost all of her social skills. So she doesn't know how to integrate herself into social situations.
Yeah.
Simple things like joining in the activities in the retirement village where she is, to reintegrate herself back into society. She's lost all of those social skills. And she has a fear of putting herself in those situations, because on a deeper emotional level, she doesn't want to be a burden on anybody.
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny you say that, and you just got me thinking about a conversation I had recently. I had my best friend over for dinner, and we were like, how's your parents? And how's your parents? Because we've known each other since class 1. That's how old we were. It was class 1 at the time. So, you know, and we're talking about the things that parents say, or the things that, you know, we always do, like oh, yes, it was December, you saw your folks, now give me the juice on what happened. And we got to talking about just the things that our parents say, or our grandparents say, that appear so brash and tactless. And does it come with aging that you feel you can say whatever you want and you don't think you're hurting someone?
I think yes, because, you know, you get to a point where, well, I'm going to say what I'm going to say.
Because I know best. I'm old enough. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, but I'm the elder, and I'm your mother, or I'm your father, and I know best. And sometimes
even if you are 50 years old.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes there is no filter, you know, and especially if they do go down that road of Alzheimer's or dementia, because the filtering system is not there at a cognitive level.
Well, that's understandable, right? That's different. Yes.
Yeah. But they do sort of, in their minds, you know, they still carry that, well, I'm the senior here, I'm the elder here.
And I'm trying to help you with this bit of advice where I tell you that hairstyle is not good on you.
Yeah, because they're still stuck in their days, you know, in my day. And that's where, you know, having to sort of, you know, placate them around, that's how things were done in your day, but also times have moved on and things are different now. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people grapple with, is change.
Yes. And they do. It is change. And sort of, you know, you are living now in the day and age of your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. And honestly, I've seen some people who are suddenly, I'm getting Facebook requests from my parents' friends, you know, so some are woke, as we're going to put it, and others wouldn't even know how to use their ATM card, you know, that kind of thing. So there is that. But it makes me wonder, what's the difference then between the person who doesn't know even how to operate their cell phone to somebody who's created a Facebook and Instagram profile at the ripe old age of 80?
Definitely, I think around embracing change, number one, but there's also the fear of technology. And I think also as our cognitive ability starts to decline, it's the ability to take on and learn more information. And so that's where keeping active, especially mentally active, plays a large role, so that we don't start losing that cognitive ability, and being willing to learn new things and technology. Starting off simple and slow. don't give your parents the latest gadget because it could potentially be just too complicated for them to understand how it works. But also having a lot of patience with them and teaching them how to use these things. And there are classes out there helping elderly people or, aging the 50 plus to embrace new technology and learn new ways of doing things. But that's also where they're at risk as well in terms of, particularly you mentioned the ATM card. And that's the other thing,
yes. I mean, there's also the risk of now being the vulnerable group. And that's what also came out in that post you shared is I understand that as you get older and even if you are trying to embrace technology, you become one of the most vulnerable groups now to the criminals, whether it is, contact crime, whether it's a robbery and they know two old people are living alone, they're not going to defend themselves, or whether it's somebody who sends you a link and says, please update, or phones you and says, I need to update your banking details. I've got all your details, and you believe them because they've given you your ID number. They've given it to you, so you believe them. And you carry on. So we need to understand and accept as we get older that we become more vulnerable to those things.
Definitely. And that's, I think, the hardest part for aging people is accepting that they are vulnerable. Because in their minds, they still think of themselves as this competent adult, this competent person that for decades has been able to do things for themselves.
And survived and never had anything stolen from them.
Yeah. And now they have to try and remember things like their ATM PIN code, for example.
And don't write it and put it into your purse. Don't write it and put it into your purse because the criminals know those things. So these are the things that we don't think about. When we traditionally think about, getting older and we think about the aches and the pains, but those kinds of things. And that's why I found that post so fascinating. So even spiritually, Paula, I found my parents started to pray a lot more as they got older. I don't know if that was because of facing their mortality or, knowing that, like you say, as we realize, we start to count how many years we, on average, might have left. Is that a reason? Is it because now we have more time, we're more settled, the noise has died down around us, that we're home and they can connect more spiritually? Is that a thing? Is it only my parents, or are we seeing that a lot, that as you get older, you do become more spiritual? They're praying a lot more. Or are they becoming more God-fearing? Do we become more God-fearing as we get older?
I think it depends on where your background has come from and whether religion or faith or beliefs have played a large role in your lifetime. Definitely, I think it does help elderly people in terms of having a purpose and a connection, whether it's to a higher power or being, or whether it's to a community through which that, belonging to a church group or some sort of faith group or community gives you, that combats the loneliness and being alone and having some sort of social circle and social activities and like-minded people to tap into. But I think also, yes, you get to a point where you do start questioning your purpose in life, and that maybe we should be more life-abiding, whatever that means for you in your world and what your belief systems are, and that it does give you something to hold on to and to believe in, and that gives you some sense of deeper, bigger, more than in your world.
Or also because now you're not as busy as you were raising a family, putting stuff on the table, that you have the space and the time to connect.
Definitely.
That way.
And some people also, they get to a point where they reflect, well, what is my life purpose now, and what do I want it to consist of? And maybe I do want to become more connected to my faiths and my beliefs and my culture and my traditions.
Okay, well, I despite the sort of stiff ankles I described and the memory loss and the memory fog or whatever it is, I must admit, Paula, I love getting older. I really, really love getting older, because for me, the older I get, the more liberated I feel. I mean, I feel like I don't have to explain myself as much. My belief in myself has grown, or it continues to grow as I get older. I have more self-respect. I don't sweat the small stuff as much. And I think that does come with a bit of age and aging. And I don't sweat it as much as I did in my 20s and 30s. Is there a sense of more emotional freedom, the freedom to just be you as we age? I mean, we hear all the stories about what goes on in old age homes and what goes on in retirement villages, right? We know they're having, a lot of them, the time of their lives and reliving the 70s and free love. I heard, I'm not saying that it's exactly what's happening.
Yes, I have heard some of those stories. It sounds like it's not necessarily a bad place to have fun.
It's not, depending on your beliefs and who you are, yes.
But I think Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I've gone completely
Are they more
blank.
liberated? Do you feel more liberated? Is that the general thing as you get older, to be more you, to be you?
I think definitely you get to a point where you don't actually care what people think about you. You don't care whether people judge you. You have a better sense of self. You believe that you've earned your stripes. You've got to where you are. You've overcome so many things in life, and that now it's about living life on your terms.
And I think a lot of the older generation probably did a lot of what was expected of them. A lot of them, especially in my culture, probably were in arranged marriages. And, yes, they lived through and learned to love the person that they were with. They didn't fall in love with them immediately or whatever it was. And they can see this. And I want to turn this into a positive as to using this. And we spoke about a spouse passing on and then suddenly using this to probably be who you really are, be who you were really meant to be. And even I'm talking about people who in their golden years come out and say, listen, I've come out the closet. I'm 70 and I always knew who I was, but I couldn't. Are we seeing a lot of that happening as well? And just what you're hearing and seeing out there.
Yeah, people are becoming more true to themselves. And they're living life on their terms, and they're not interested in living up to people's expectations anymore. It's around my expectations of what I want my life to consist of. And I'm not here to people please anymore.
Yes.
I'm not here to conform to what society dictates or what others dictate, because I'm an adult. Yeah. And I can make my own choices, and I'm entitled to make my own choices. And if I want to come out of the closet, I'm going to come out of the closet because I want to live life now how I want to live it.
And then on the other hand, you have those, like we spoke about earlier, who lose their sense of self, who lose their identity because they're not part of something anymore. They're not part of a workforce. They're not part of a couple. They're not part of a bigger family physically. Their family could be spread out all over the world, but they're not in that same house with them. So they don't know what to do with themselves.
And that's where the loneliness comes in, which is a big factor.
Is loneliness a part of getting older?
It definitely is. Yeah. And there's a difference between being alone and lonely. Yes. So alone is a choice. So I'm choosing to stay at home this afternoon and read a book and be on my own, as opposed to loneliness, which is around feeling like you don't have any meaningful connections and relationships in your life, whether it's personal touch and contact, or whether it's through devices and platforms and technology, but that you don't have any meaningful relationships that touch you at a soul level, that you feel cared for or that you care about, and being willing to reach out and make contact and make connection so that we have people in our lives. And that's where joining things like bridge clubs, for example, and gardening clubs and those kind of things, and churches fill that need and fill that void. But it's about human connection at the end of the day.
And what about finding love in your golden years? Or what about deciding, okay, my partner's passed on. I love that person, but no disrespect to anybody. But I found somebody else. Finding love could be a whole new experience, and even sexuality as you get older.
Well, apparently the retirement villages and homes is where it's all happening.
It is. I'm not even going to say what the doctors are saying about the cases they are dealing with, but let's not go there.
But let's not go there because, people in their 70s, 80s can be sexually active.
Yeah, without the risk of falling pregnant. So that is leading to a whole host of other problems. But again, we won't go there, right?
That's one plus factor about finding love later on in life. Yeah. You don't have to worry about that. And, I think largely it's around the companionship.
That word just popped into my head, yeah.
And having someone to share your life with, especially when you don't have this rigid routine of getting up and going to work every day that fills your time.
Yes.
And having someone to share things with, whether it's activities or experiences, because that's the only thing we can take with us to our grave, right?
Yeah.
It's experiences. And I think the older we get, I know for me, especially turning 50, it's around I'm detaching from material stuff. I've downsized my lifestyle. To a lock up and go, because I want to experience life now. It's about lived experiences, because those are the things that living in the moment and tackling head on life, living life head on, because those are the things that you're going to take with you. Those are the things that you're going to treasure, is the people that you spend time with, doing things with, sharing things with, as opposed to the material things that when you're gone, people are potentially going to be fighting over, or they're going to donate to the hospice or some kind of charity.
Okay, so you're choosing life and experiences, minimizing or minimalizing, whatever the word is, your physical space so that you can do these things. I hope you're taking pictures because you might not be able to remember them in 40 years, right, Paula? Make sure you take pictures. Okay.
I'll post on Facebook for you.
Yeah, please, yes, I have them. I'll keep them for you. But, the other thing, and you were talking about that, is I constantly hear, and I always heard my dad is constantly surprised that he's still alive. There seems to be a lot of, I'm living on borrowed time. Oh, I'm surprised because all the men in my family, didn't make it past the age of 50. Is there that sense of, I don't even know what the word for that is, but, and I always want to say, don't say that because you're tempting fate. Like, really don't say that because he's in his late 70s. And I just want to, do we hear a lot of that? And what is that a sign of where somebody keeps going, I'm lucky to be alive. Yes, I made it through another year. Do we sort of joke about those things? Is that a fear? Is that his fear coming through as sort of humor?
I think the emotion underneath that is fear.
Yeah.
And many a true word said in jest, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I've lived another year.
I'm on borrowed time. Yeah.
Enjoy the borrowed time. Make the most of the borrowed time. A lot of it is a mindset thing around. You can choose to be the victim mentality around it and count the days to your death, as opposed to living the days until your death.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference there.
Yeah.
So what's your choice? And people wait until the one day. One day when I retire, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go on that long lost trip that I've been longing and promising myself for, and the cruise and the this and the that. Why wait? Do it now while you can, while you're still physically able to, but also mentally able to do those things, while you can remember it and enjoy it, and come back and talk about it, and tell your grandkids.
Yeah. And then on the other hand, Paula, you have so many people who put so much into fighting aging, whether they're swallowing 20 pills a day, whether they can afford and they're going for procedures to actually stop the aging process. And, some of us can sit back and judge and we go, just age gracefully, man. Just age gracefully. It's okay. But is there anything wrong with that?
I don't think so. I think, at the end of the day, it's personal choice around how you want to live out your life, as long as you're not imposing harm on anyone else or imposing your beliefs on anyone else. If you feel you want to go for all the nips and tucks in the book because you can afford it, hey, why not? It's your money. You're spending it.
Yeah. And technically, the aging process, the metabolism starts to slow down from 30 or something? Yeah. So, and when we talk about aging, we tend to think about much older. We tend to think about 50 and older. Sorry. But I'm getting there. I'll be there soon. But we don't realize this process has already, it starts from the day we're born, but in terms of physically what is happening in your body, from your 30s, things start to change and things start to slow down.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the two key things are around managing your aging process. The two key things is around lifestyle in terms of eating habits and those kind of things, so smoking and drinking and stuff. And there is some research that's been done where sugar has a direct relation to dementia.
Oh, okay.
So cutting out your sugar, cutting out your processed stuff, eating a healthy diet and those kind of things. And then number two is movement in terms of exercise.
Yes.
And not only from a physical point of view in terms of your flexibility and your ability to move and all of those kind of things and preventing the aging process, but also what it does for your mental health and well-being.
Yeah.
Those are the two key things. And that's why it's out there. Any doctor, any mental health place, they all prescribe things around healthy diet and healthy lifestyle in terms of exercise and movement.
And that could offset the depression or help in some way that we spoke about earlier as you get older, instead of just sitting at home watching your soapies for 6 hours because now you're not working. Get out and move a little bit. And I've seen it. I've seen it with my parents. I've seen it with in-laws and friends' parents when they're not moving. My parents canceled they froze their gym membership when COVID hit, but they haven't gone back. So I'm like, what is your excuse now? And I could see that they were better. They were better back then. And I see the change, and they seem to have aged a lot more since they stopped being as physical. Sweeping the backyard, yes, okay, it's a bit of exercise, but really, it's not enough.
No, and I think it's more around, it comes back to that routine when I have routine gives me structure gives me purpose, and then I've got something to look forward to every day. And that simple act of going to the gym also gives me social stimulation and interaction with other people. And you're not stuck in those four walls, which can, the whole cabin fever thing, we know it very well from COVID and the pandemic and that around the mental health and well-being. But also, sitting there channel hopping and binge watching on series is a form of coping, really.
Yeah, or escaping.
Absolutely.
What your reality is at this moment.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to aging and when it comes to what is expected of you as an older person or an old person, because at some point you become an old person. I don't know what age that is, what the deadline is for that one. You find that people expect you to toe the line. And I'm guilty of this because recently I've been trying to get my parents to move to Joburg, where I can take care of them, where I can take care of their needs, because there are certain things now that they aren't able to do for themselves. Dad is finding driving alone, and they live alone. They're two old people who live in this house that they built 43 years ago, blood, sweat, and tears, coming from nothing, both on teachers' salaries, which wasn't a lot in those days. And when they refused and they said, no, we think we'll just put in an electric fence and be here, but you can't even drive to the shops. And then on the other hand, it occurred to me that I'm asking them to leave what is, in essence, their safe and happy place, a place that they built and something that they're proud of, what they've got to show for that lifetime of work. Am I being selfish? Am I expecting too much of them? Are they being stubborn? And I don't quite know how to deal with that situation.
And that's a big thing that a lot of people are facing now. So you have all good intentions and you mean well with what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But from their side, it's changing everything that is familiar to them.
Yeah.
And the older we get, we struggle with things like sense of direction.
Yes.
The familiarity of my local shop. I know where the milk is. I know where the bread is. I know where to park. I know all of these things.
Yeah.
Taking them out of that environment and expecting them to start all over again.
Yeah.
Because it's familiar to you. It's not familiar to them, leaving their potential, whatever little social circle they have behind. It's hugely stressful. It's, when we come to the top 5 things that we can experience, moving house is one of them.
Yeah.
And they're leaving 43 years of legacy, history, memories, everything behind and starting all over again from scratch. And it's a huge transition for them mentally, emotionally, stress, all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
And so it's the easiest way is to transition them slowly, but it's also taking away that sense of independence. I can go when I want to. I've got my own car. I've got this. I know where I'm going. I know the car guard. I know the shopper packer at Woolies. If I can't find what I'm looking for, I ask him. He knows me by name. He'll go and fetch it for me. It's all of that familiarity that we're leaving behind and coming to a place where I know nothing and potentially nobody other than my family. But my family also has their life and they get on and they do their thing.
And I get that. And I understand that. And then Then I get to the point where I'm irritated because I say, but you're crying every weekend. I miss my grandchildren. You've got your grandchildren here. You could come here and see them so many times in the week. You could spend every weekend with us, So what are you crying for? Because I'm offering you the alternative. So I don't know where the middle ground is for. And I'm not the only one going through this. There are millions of people around the world who are grappling with this very same issue, So I just wonder, where's the middle ground? How do we deal with this? Because you've got to make their older years enjoyable. And my biggest fear is I force you and I ask you to come and you come here and then you're going to be depressed and unhappy till it's all over.
Well, we all know that change is a process, right? So it's about how do you transition them in a way that feels comfortable for their pace and what they are able to deal with. So instead of getting them to lock, stock and barrel, move up to Joburg, maybe do it over a period of time. Come up for a week at a time, 1 week a month, for example, whatever you can afford from an affordability and a structure point of view. And get them into a familiar environment and routine and potentially that way where they can see the benefits and feel and experience the benefits for themselves. Because right now it's too unrealistic for them to grasp.
Yeah, it is. It's too much. It's too much. And I also, when I think about packing up my parents' house, and I said, you won't do it yourself. I'll come and help you. So don't be scared. I said, but by the way, Mom, there's a lot of stuff there that you aren't even using, that you're not even going to bring with you. And I almost wanted to say, but you're a hoarder. I was like, but do we hoard as we get older? And why?
Sentimental value.
Yeah.
Is a lot of it.
And letting go of reminds you of a time in your life, I suppose. Hey?
Exactly. And that's where becoming detached.
Yeah.
To material things.
Okay, well, you talk to my parents. Will you phone them? I'll give you their file. I'll give you their, or the next time they come, I'll arrange. We'll cook you a nice biryani, Paula, a vegetarian biryani, because I know, and then you can talk to my mother and maybe convince them that this is what is what they need to do. So, what are our takeaways from what we've talked about today? What that post was that you shared, and it really opened up quite a bit and made me think about a lot of things I didn't think about. One, for myself getting older, and for my parents and my in-laws and my husband getting older as well, and what my children might have to deal with. What are the takeaways about? Because a lot of these things we can't change. We just have to accept and move on. And how do we prepare for that? Not only for those people who are older, how do we prepare for that for ourselves?
So whether you like it or not, we are going to get older, and we're going to get to a point where our birthday candles are blown out, so to speak. With
a fire extinguisher. Yes, because there are too many candles on the cake.
How do you make the most of that transition in terms of the aging process from a mindset point of view? So approaching it with a positive mindset and taking care of your lifestyle and your mental and physical and emotional well-being, and financial, obviously, that plays a big role as well. And that's the one thing that you do have responsibility over, and that you can take responsibility and accountability for, right? Start living life now and deciding around some of the things that you want to experience now, and don't wait until one day, because one day it may be too late and you haven't done all of those things. And, people on their deathbed don't say, I wish I'd worked longer. I wish I had, just saved more money, those kind of things. They regret not doing the things that they always wanted to do and spending the time with the people that they wanted to spend with, and then, definitely from a social point of view, the stimulation and the interaction, from a cognitive ability, from a social interaction and social activities, getting into with people of like-mindedness, same age, activities, whatever it is that's going to help you with those social skills, number one. Number two, around combating the loneliness and being alone. That is definitely a big help. And that it's a process, and downscaling as you go helps. So don't be stuck in a home for 45 years where you've probably hoarded stuff
with
and
dishes you never ever use and are never ever going to use.
Understanding that, yes, you had these things, they bring back lots of memories, but you can't take them to the grave with you. And the likelihood of your family wanting them is probably highly unlikely, because times have changed and technology is newer and different and all of those kind of things. And rather see the joy in other people using them now if you can.
Yes,
give
people
it away.
Who don't have.
Yeah.
And also don't be afraid, I suppose, to be open about trying new things. I mean, if you're 70 and you want to, or 80 and you want to go out and get your yoga qualifications, try it. Show people how limber you can be at 80.
And also I think, for people on the other side to have some compassion and empathy and understanding, and that the older we get, we are more like children.
We do.
Teach us, treat your parents like you would a child in terms of having patience.
Yeah. Okay, don't talk down to them.
Yeah.
But, okay, right. But
have patience with them, have compassion, have empathy, have understanding, because, yes, they're still your parent, but where they are potentially is not necessarily the same parent that you still have in your mind.
Yes.
Because the aging process has taken over.
And aren't we fearful of seeing our parents getting older? That could some of our frustrations actually be because we don't want them to get older, and we don't want to see them, and we don't want to see them feeling old, because it makes us just feel our own mortality or fear of losing them.
We don't want to lose them because we love them, and they play an important role in our lives and our children's lives, for that matter.
Yeah.
That's where we've got families. But I think it's also the part of, letting go.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, Paula, thank you so very much. I mean, I'm going to ignore the stiff ankles And I'm going to forgive myself for forgetting which child is which tomorrow morning when I wake up. And so, my friends, however we feel about getting older and however we actually feel as we get older, there are some realities that we must prepare for. Aging actually starts from the day we're born, actually. Some of the things we've spoken about today may happen to some of us, but not to others. But some of these things will happen to all of us. Whether you're a line dancing, swinging, bungee jumping granny or grandpa, or you've settled for quiet bridge clubs and once a week scripture reading groups, things will eventually change, both internally and externally. And it's time to talk about it and prepare for it. Until the next time on Syntropy.